you can, if you wish, you may add something about the theme of hydration. Since it's 93 degrees, it's an appropriate topic. You can say your favorite biking beverage, or a little story about hydration, or what kind of water bottle you really love, or whatever else. So I'll start. So my name is Cynthia Palmer, and since I'm vice chair and the chair isn't here, I'm going to tell 2 quick stories instead of 1, but I'll make them super fast. First, years ago, I was going for a bike ride in Maryland with a friend. So I rode up to Maryland, we rode around all day, and I rode back, and it was a day like today in the 90s. I passed a vendor truck on my way home, and they were selling bottles of water for $3, and I said, no way in hell am I going to pay $3. So I kept riding. I was really thirsty. I had used up all my water. I got home. I called my mom on the landline and said, just letting you know, I made it home. It was wonderful. I hung up the phone, and just as I hung up, I fainted. I woke up later with a super high fever, nausea, headache. Welcome to the world of dehydration. Story number 2 was last summer. I went for a little run. It was again a day like today, so I was only going to go 3 or 4 miles. I hadn't bothered to have a drink. I had no GPS, no money, no phone. I went for this little run. I saw a shortcut. I took the shortcut. I ended up running 14 miles instead of my 3 or 4. I made it home, and I immediately went to the sink and I drank several quarts of water. There were no electrolytes involved in this process, only water. I ended up with severe leg cramps. It was the most painful thing in my life. It was worse than twice doing childbirth with no meds. So the moral of the story is take hydration seriously and don't do what I did. All right, should we go around? I see on the attendance list we have Collier Cook.
Hello, I always seem to be first. That's okay though. I can't think of any time, since my bike trips are relatively short, I can't think of any time where I've had issues with hydration. I have had issues with hydration when running, like you have. That's bad news. But biking, and since most of the time I'm on a Capital Bike Share bike, there's no good place to put a water bottle of any sort. And so me being an engineer, I thought I was clever enough to figure out something with the bungee cord in the basket once. It was a bottle, just a regular bottle. And then I was, I don't know, about a mile down the road, hit a bump, and the bungee cord becomes a slingshot and just throws the bottle, on the other side of the road. So lesson learned, always use a bottle with a handle when you're in cabbie, so you can weave your the bungee through there, and it won't just start flying away. So, but yeah, that's the only thing I can think of regarding hydration, at least on Capital Bike Share bikes.
Great story. Next on this list is Dana.
Yeah, Dana Bress, I'm in favor of hydration.
And the next is Dan Neighbors.
Hi, everybody. I have a similar short story, kind of in contrast to you, Cynthia, is I did an adventure race about 5 years ago, and we ran out of water. So I actually did buy the $3 bottles of water just to finish the race. Sometimes you just need to do that.
You're smarter than me.
I wouldn't say that. I think it was just poor planning on our part.
And next we have David Ansel.
Yes, hello. Similar to Cynthia, I once had a fainting episode due to dehydration after exercise. So since then, I've pretty much gotten religion, and usually I drink quite a bit before I go out, and then I bring a water bottle along. Although in this kind of heat, I really like to avoid the middle of the day and either go early or the very end of the day.
And David Ballack.
Hi all, David Ballack with Bike Arlington. Definitely don't have too many hydration problems while biking, but while through hiking the Appalachian Trail, ran into a lot of water issues and drinking dirty water and trying my best to stay hydrated wherever I could. So do my best, but sometimes out there it's tough.
Wow, yeah. How far did you hike?
I did the whole thing.
Oh my gosh, okay.
Yep. 2019. It was a lot of fun.
Wow. All right, we have D.H. Lust.
That's Dwayne.
Oh, that's me. Okay.
Okay.
I was thinking, sure. Well, I don't have any hydration problems. Generally, when I ride, I usually plan ahead. My worst experience was going hypoglycemic on my first Skyline ride. I didn't realize that the first 21 miles was uphill, and I thought I had a big breakfast, but the last 2 miles took an hour because it was all uphill, and of course you were loaded, and so it made it more interesting. But I pretty much keep at least 2 water bottles when it gets hot out there, so I haven't had a real problem with that.
Again, smarter than me. Next, we have Eric Goodman.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't know that I've had any one incident like that. I've had bonking several times where I've just gotten so tired that I had to take a nap on the side of the road. But other than that, I haven't had any water issues. But I don't think I have been drinking enough in general, because I have had kidney stones, and I think that's probably due to not drinking enough when riding.
Those are painful. I like the sound effects. All right, next we have Gabriel Barrett.
Hi guys, I'm Gabriel. This is my first BAC meeting. I'm an intern under Leah with the transportation planning team. And I don't really have any cool water stories. I just have this water bottle I always carry around with me. It has like a little Forest Service logo on it, which is kind of cool. My dad, he works at the Forest Service, so I thought I would just share that. Nice to meet you guys.
Great, welcome. Next we have Jillian Burgess.
Hey, I am at my in-laws where we have rented a 22-foot water slide for the day because all the kids are here. That's that. But I think I have the opposite problem. I drink so much water. The first time I did a spin bike workout, a really hard one that I had scheduled early in the morning, I put too much water out for myself, and I drank so much water that it was too much water, and I ended up just throwing up like for an hour after I stopped. It was miserable. So it is possible to drink too much water.
Wow. Sorry. All right, next we have Mike Hanna.
Yeah, I decided to avoid the heat in DC and be in Florida this week, where we're actually under the right in the middle of the tropical storm out there. So I'm feeling very hydrated right now.
Wow.
Lots of rain, lots of cool, and no biking today. 30-mile-an-hour winds and inch-an-hour rain. But
Oh my, be
I
safe.
feel for you guys in the heat.
Well, good luck in the storm. Next we have Leah.
Hi. So Leah Gerber, I'm the BAC liaison. I'm the transportation planner with Arlington County. I wanted to welcome Gabe or Gabriel. He already introduced himself. I think my pretty good on bike rides with water. I think similar to David, I've had some backpacking water issues where we ran out of iodine tablets and we just had to drink from a stream and hope for the best. So yeah, that's mine.
Yikes.
Oh, quick thing, also just noted, this meeting is being recorded. There's a message that should be at the top of your screen. It's also in the chat. Feel free to let me know if you have any issues with this.
All right, thanks, Leah.
Yep.
Next we have Majdi. I hope I'm not butchering your name.
That's fine, Cynthia. That's close enough.
Okay.
I've been called worse. Good evening, everybody. I'm Majdi Shamali. I'm with the C2E2 Commission, Climate Change, Energy and Environment, and just sitting in and listening in and kind of learning a little bit and seeing, looking for opportunities that are of interest to both commissions.
Wonderful. Welcome. Next we have Noreen.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Today I went out for a ride and I forgot to take my water bottle. I left it on the kitchen counter. So what does that say about me? But anyway, I made it. I didn't ride that far. I've had times where I took water and wished I had more because I like to not only drink it, but on hot days, pour it on my head and my shoulders to cool my body down. And I've had days where I wish I had more water to pour. But anyway, I don't have any terrible horror stories, so.
Good.
Yeah, good in a way, yeah. Not very entertaining, but.
Oh, entertainment is not a good thing often. Next we have Pamela.
Hi, Pam Van Hine with Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and thank you all for inviting me to attend this meeting. And the first year that my husband Brian and I trained for the Marine Corps Marathon in 2003. I think we had about a 12-mile training run, with a day kind of like this, which was fine. But afterwards, we went to the Smithsonian Folklife Festival in the afternoon, and I thought I was going to die. I almost fainted at one of the tents. I tried to sit in the shade. I said, Brian, why are you in the shade? I said, I'm dying. So I always have water, always have salt, always have food, always have money, always have ID, always have a Metro Pass, and always know where all the bathrooms are. That's really important too. So that's how you get through it all. And thank you for having me.
Thank you. You are way smarter than me. Next we have Randy.
Way older too.
Well, I went riding in Tucson with 2 water bottles, thinking, that would take me at least part of the way, and it took me about the first 5 miles. So then I discovered a drugstore that had a spigot out front. You put in a quarter and you got a gallon. So it was a fun scramble to see how much I could drink and end up with a full stomach of water and 2 water bottles full.
Nice. All right, next we have Sergio.
Hello, thank you for inviting me, Leah, to the BAC meeting. And I'm Sergio, design engineer with Arlington County. And I don't really have any horror stories either, but this is my favorite. Well, it's my only bike water bottle. It's a $15 Camelback one. I would say my favorite one is a Hydro Flask, but the one I got is a little too big for the bottle holder. But yeah, just anything that's insulated, I'm happy with.
Wonderful. And the last on this list is Stephen Clark.
Hey guys, Steve Clark with the police department. Thanks for inviting me. My only hydration story is I try to drink 64 ounces a day. I don't always do it, but usually do. So try to stay regularly hydrated. Gets hot out on the motorcycle, and don't get on a bicycle as often as I should or want to. But I do ride a motorcycle, so if that counts for anything.
Oh, it sure does. You're exposed like all of us. All right. Is there anyone else here who I missed? I guess not. In that case, we can start with a discussion of the county's role in the Route 1 project. And I think Dana is going to lead that one. Dana, are you
Okay,
there?
unmute, yeah.
Okay.
I've been doing this crap for a year. It's part of the deal that was brokered between Virginia, Arlington, and Amazon to bring HQ2 to Arlington. The Commonwealth made a commitment to Amazon to, look at the safety, accessibility, and pedestrian experience along Route 1. They formed a task force, and the BAC was asked to provide a couple of bodies to that task force. And Steve Offit and I serve as the BAC reps. Pam Van Hine is the rep from the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and there are also a number of folks from the community groups in South Arlington in zip code 22202, which includes National Landing as well as the other neighborhoods down here. The commitment is, the commitment to make Route 1 more safe, accessible, and improve the pedestrian experience is likely to get support from advocates for both cycling and walking. After all, what's not to like about that? The grand plan articulated by the National Landing bid, was to work with VDOT and create an urban boulevard with shops and other retail, so we could walk, shop, and dine along this roadway, which is the new Route 1. The challenge, obviously, is that Route 1 through Arlington sees a boatload of traffic that neither originates nor ends in South Arlington. It's coming from, hell, I'll blame Woodbridge, and point south of Arlington and going, to elsewhere in Arlington or into the district or elsewhere. So Route 1 is would be both an urban boulevard, but also a highway, channeling traffic north. Well, as part of the study that VDOT did was they saw that traffic, and they said a transportation demand management system would reduce this traffic. They didn't articulate exactly how it would do it or who would do it or when they could do it. So it's not completely clear what the plan for it. They just kind of, sprinkled TDM pixie dust. And that said, I think TDM would probably work. And if it would, why don't we do it now? Why are we waiting to actually start building something before we do TDM? If TDM will work, let's do it now. Start tomorrow. But since the agreement between Virginia and Amazon, the scope was the VDOT scope of this project was focused on just the two overpasses at 15th and 18th Street. VDOT eliminated 12th Street overpass to protect the Metroway routes, and they weren't considering the area at 20th Street and further south. And those of you that have hung out in South Arlington know there's a bunch of development going on in the southern half of Crystal City, south of 23rd Street, all the way to 4 Mile Run. And so by changing the scope, we've reduced the project length to about 1,600 feet. For your information, Route 1 through Arlington between 4 Mile Run and 395 is about 9,000 feet long. So this urban boulevard would be less than 25% of the portion of Route 1 as it goes through Arlington. And so if indeed they continue with it the way it's scoped, as development occurs in the rest of South Arlington along Route 1, Arlington will have to embark on another study to unsuck Route 1 on the south part. There's plenty of places where there's curb cuts, there's aprons, there's access, there's utility cuts in the south part of Route 1 that could be addressed now. Initially, VDOT wanted to consider three alternatives: the status quo, the do nothing alternative, bringing Route 1 to grade at 15th and 18th, and to create this urban boulevard, and then the Arlington County approved Crystal City sector plan strategy of leaving the road elevated but moving the ramps. There are ramps that currently service 15th Street, but bringing those ramps to the interior, so the exits would be on the inside of the road rather than the outside. VDOT continues to include the Crystal City sector plan, but is recommending against it because of the cost. They're estimating the cost of removing 15th and 18th Street overpasses and creating this urban boulevard to be about $180 million. The Crystal City sector plan, they estimated about $260. And however, VDOT acknowledges that the 180 doesn't include several large costs, including mitigation efforts for pedestrians and cyclists who would now be forced to cross Route 1 at grade. Imagine 23rd Street, how much we enjoy that when we cross there. Or the relocation of the bus facilities that are currently under 18th. And they haven't really talked about it. They would free up land that could be used for development. Comparing the recent sale of the property that the Americana Motel sits on, we just back of the envelope calculating, figured out that the land where the ramps are is worth about $180 million. Comparing it, using the same price per square foot as the Americana Motel site. So we're talking a fair amount of change. Our concern is that removal of the overpasses at 15th and 18th Street eliminates that totally safe and low stress walking and cycling route across Route 1 and replaces them with crosswalks and beg buttons, in essence, creating more 23rd Streets. VDOT included a note that says they could construct a cyclist bridge or tunnel, but they provided no cost estimates or no locations. I would suggest, think about the bridge by the Home Depot on Route 50, just east of Seven Corners. I measured that this morning on Google Earth, and it's about 750 feet from the time you hit the ramp to go up to the bridge deck, and then coming down. So you're going to cross a 150-foot roadway by walking or cycling 750 feet. That's likely to encourage pedestrians just to go out and play in traffic. And none of those costs were estimated by VDOT. Arlington has been a member of the Route 1 Task Force, the county, but have been largely silent in the task force meetings. I'm sure they're communicating behind the scenes, but it's not completely clear Arlington doesn't appear to have taken a position. So we staffed a letter yesterday, which we're now at like version 5 or 6 on the Google groups to the Arlington County manager, giving him advice, which is our charter, about what they could do about the project and what we think the county could do about it. Thanks, Cynthia.
So do people, first of all, have questions or thoughts about the information that Dana just shared?
Oh, one more note. The VDOT deadline for comments is the 12th of July. I will send out, I'll put a link to both the Google groups and the bike forum with a link to their page where you can send comments. And I'll probably also share some of my comments too, if you want to crib my notes.
So David Ansel, did you have something?
Yeah, that was very interesting and informative, Dana. I guess my question is, why isn't an overpass for bicyclists and pedestrians sort of a viable option for something like this? I mean, I go over the fairly new, what I think is a terrific pedestrian and bike overpass in East Falls Church over Lee Highway that opened a couple of months ago. And that, eliminated a lot of harrowing crossings of Lee Highway. Is an overpass for pedestrians and bicyclists something that is on the table, or should it be, or what are your thoughts on that?
Okay. Yeah. Let me suggest that the one that you just embraced philosophically over Lee Highway is probably the exception rather than the rule. In the fact that as a cyclist or as a pedestrian, the amount of distance you're going to get from one side of that to the other doesn't change a lick, and the slopes are pretty decent. If you, however, look at, for example, the Route 50 overpass, it's basically the width of the right-of-way. So there's a 300-foot long ramp going up to the bridge 150 feet or so, and then a 300-foot long ramp coming down. Basically, it extends that 150-foot road crossing to 750 feet. That's one of the concerns. The other concern is that people won't use. People are not as inclined to use it. And the third issue, I think, would be where does one put it? The block at 18th Street is less than between 18th Street and the edge of Route 1 is less than 300 feet long. So the ramp would start somewhere west of Eads and extend probably down to the new metro stop or the new metro station entrance at Crystal Drive. And if they were to do it as a zigzag, like the Route 50 bridge, it would take up the space the Urban Boulevard is planning on setting up, so you can sip a latte by right next to Route 1.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a geometry issue.
Right.
Thank
you.
We favor, arguably, if you have a choice, you should make the cars climb the hill. You should let peds, walk on the flat and make the cars climb over them. Just because the cars don't seem to have a problem with that.
That makes sense. I don't know if people have had a chance to read the letter. Ideally, we could get sign off at this meeting to go ahead with the letter from the BAC to Mr. Schwartz. Does anyone object to our moving ahead with the letter? And if not, then maybe we could vote on it. And then if people have more inputs or edits, we're really, really grateful to those who have sent in their edits, and if others want to look at it tonight, that's fine too. But it would be great to get the okay from the BAC to go ahead and send it if people are comfortable with it.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Eric Goodman.
Dana, I know you gave us the background, but can you summarize the points in the letter so we all know what we're voting on clearly?
Yeah. The points of the letter are basically, telling Mr. Schwartz that, we were asked to provide representation, a little bit of the background, what the VDOT recommendations are, and a lot of this is probably more to memorialize it as much as, because he's certainly aware of it. Our concern about eliminating those low or no stress routes across Route 1. The fact that we see this as inconsistent with the Vision Zero action plan. We're creating conflicts between pedestrians and motorists and cyclists and motorists while we've, immediately after adopting Vision Zero. A suggestion that the county request the scope of the project be expanded to consider 23rd Street, which most of the traffic guys and DES say is the worst intersection in Arlington, and that we're then that little short stretch between Reed's and 23rd and Route 1, that VDOT expand the scope to include all of Route 1 all the way down to the county line, that they evaluate how people on bikes will travel through the area when they acknowledge the fact that they're going to dump traffic onto the parallel streets. Arlington has relied on Eads and Crystal Drive as the safe routes to go north-south. And if VDOT is now shoving traffic onto Crystal Drive and Eads, then that's going to make Arlington's job a lot harder. Consideration for how to get people across Route 1. And then the TDM. And we basically our ask is, until a comprehensive study is done, that Arlington consider the VDOT effort as incomplete. In 100 words or less.
Sorry, did anyone else? Randy?
I'm an observer, so I'm not voting, but I thought the letter was great. And I thought it covered all the issues that we need to raise as the BAC.
Thank you. Should we go ahead and vote? And then if there are little changes in the margins, people could certainly send in comments tonight or tomorrow.
This is Eric. Can I just add one other?
Oh, yes.
One other comment. So I know a few years back, there were improvements with public art and other things at the underpasses to kind of make them more comfortable, more, for folks that do pass under the highway. Does the study take into account the status quo and potential improvements that could be made with the status quo and still maybe get to the overall vision?
Not really, not within public art. We certainly think that that 18th Street could be enhanced. Arlington's put a boatload of money into several other overpasses with lighting and a bunch of things to make them actually more approachable, and feel, and so everybody can feel better about them. And 18th Street could easily be that way, and there's no reason that they couldn't do that. And the other thing is, they want to present, this urban boulevard, but there's no reason you couldn't have a mezzanine level, my term, entrance facing Route 1 if you wanted to go out there and sip a latte, and have the grade level entrance facing Eads or Clark Bell. So you could still maintain that grade separation so people could safely get across Route 1 on 18th Street and 15th Street but still presenting the concept of an urban boulevard. And then possibly the stretch of 18th Street, the overpass, you could almost trick it out like a High Line in New York. Because you're giving much longer sight lines because of the elevation. There's any of a number of things that could be done. The problem was we started with the answer and then we developed a study to support the answer. For the record, that's my opinion, not a position anybody's articulated.
So we're going on 20 minutes behind the schedule. So should we do a vote? Are people comfortable with that? So I think I heard a motion from Dana to go ahead.
Yes, you did.
So all in favor of sending the letter to Mr. Schwartz? Is anyone in favor?
Aye.
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 And
Aye.
wonderful. All right. And how about those opposed to sending a letter to Mr. Schwartz? I think we're going to proceed then. Thank you so much, Dana, for that presentation.
You're welcome.
And the next thing on the agenda is that Lieutenant Stephen Clark from the Arlington County Police Department is going to speak with us about the ACPD and Vision Zero.
All right, guys, I'll try to be quick. Leah sent over like 4 points that you guys want to talk about. The first was the police role in the implementation of Vision Zero. So basically, our role is to provide the data that we get from our FR300s, that's our crash reports. So when we go out to a crash, all the information that gets recorded on that, we share that with DES to establish causes, conditions, roadway defects, whatever the situation was, so that we can narrow down the causes and try to solve them. So that's probably the biggest thing that we do with Vision Zero. But then as far as citizen complaints, if there's a constant speeding problem or perceived speeding problem, we'll go out and study it. We'll put out classifiers. We'll go out with our laser units and we'll see if there's an actual speeding problem. If there is, we'll share that information with DES also and talk about engineering solutions to that problem. And then, of course, our ticket data gets shared as well. So basically all the data that we collect as a police department gets shared for helping out Vision Zero and trying to reduce crashes. And then, of course, we're the enforcement branch. So if there are issues, we go out and try to educate people and do public outreach and various methods and media releases and campaigns sponsored by VDOT and other entities, and we do enforcement when necessary. Does anybody have any questions about that specific part of it, our role in implementation of Vision Zero? All right, if not, we'll move on to priorities for in-person enforcement. So obviously our biggest priority is crash reduction. So we used to have what was called the traffic accident reduction program. We're getting away from the term accident. So we're calling it the crash reduction program now. And that comes from obviously where the majority of our crashes are. So the data gets collected and then we have off-duty officers that go out and work those locations to try to slow people down or eliminate the causes of those crashes. And then we also use off-duty officers at our highest complaint locations. And then we we put people where they need to be put. Basically, we emphasize the highest necessary locations for them to go out. I hope that's what you were looking for in that. The third point was current authorities and future plans for automatic and red light cameras. So our current photo red program is still working. It's still viable. We're still getting tons of red light violations and people get sent their tickets. We just got approval to expand that program. So we're in the process of having several intersections around the county studied by our vendor. And once they're studied, we'll select several of those intersections to implement a broader photo red light program. And last year they passed the photo speed enforcement program for construction sites and school zones. DES has taken the lead and they're hiring a person to come in and study which school zones would be the best for that and how to implement it to be most efficient. And then we'll follow up with that and proceed with that program as well. So photo speed is coming. I don't know the exact timeline on that, but it is coming. It's on its way. And I think it's safer for everybody. And then the fourth point was safety and enforcement data. And I'm not sure exactly what you were looking for from that. We do share that information and we do collect it. I'm not the hub of that. We have somebody who specializes in that kind of stuff. So I don't have data for you right now, but I'm willing to get it if you have any specific questions or inquiries that I can follow up on. I'll be glad to. And let me know if you have any questions on any of that stuff. I try to be brief.
Fantastic, thank you. It looks like Dana has a question.
Yeah, quick question. So when you expand the red light program, are you going to be at the maximum we're legally allowed to have? And if not, why not?
I don't believe we'll be at the maximum by code. I think we're going to be limited by the budget that the county's provided to us.
So the revenue from the tickets can't be used to pay for the cameras? You're paying the vendor with the revenue, right?
That'd be a question for the manager or the county board. So as far as the revenue goes, I'm sure that the revenue outweighs the cost. However, the revenue from the cameras goes into the general fund, not to the police department budget.
Thank you.
Yep.
Who else
All right,
has
guys.
questions?
Thanks for the invite.
So I have one more question.
Go ahead.
So when you mentioned that you're gathering safety data on the crashes, I'm wondering if that includes the categories for vehicle type, like what proportion are SUVs or what proportion are buses or trucks or sedans, or like whether that is looked at as a category, because there's so much evidence now that the larger vehicles, I mean, particularly the large SUVs, are responsible for a lot more of the deaths and serious injuries to pedestrians and cyclists. And I'm wondering to what extent that data is sort of pulled out and categorized.
That's a good question. I know that the vehicle is listed and the type of vehicle is listed. So obviously if it's a bus, it's going to say that it was a bus. And I know that was one of the requests that we had from DES to try to clarify, to get tighter data on that. It's not the FR 300, the form itself doesn't really narrow it down as well as it could. But we can't change the FR 300. So what we can do is add in the narrative of the FR 300 what specifics we're trying to get to try to narrow that down. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, it doesn't do as good a job as it could That might be something that we could look at on a broader scale with the state, to amend the FR 300 blocks to add that in. But it does list. So if we had to dig deep, because it'll list the tag number and everything else, we could dig deeper into it. It would just be labor intensive to try to figure all that out.
Is that public data that you'd have to dig into, or I mean, could any of us dig if we wanted to? Could our kids dig for a project?
No, the FR 300, only certain data can be shared publicly, so it's all protected. It's basically like a police report. So certain information can be shared, but specific information in that, like if you were to give a tag number, that could identify an individual. So if I were to give your tag number out to somebody and then they come knocking on your door because you ran over a pedestrian, or they park outside your house with satellite cameras, you probably wouldn't like that. So certain information is shareable, but specific information isn't, if that makes sense.
So, and there's no way to sort of separate it out. I mean, either we see it or we don't, it sounds like.
Right, exactly, yep.
Okay, got it. So who else, anyone else have questions? That was quick. All right.
All right, guys, thank you very much. I'll stick around for a little while in case anything else comes up.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's see. The next topic is intersection safety and related Vision Zero priorities with Dan Neighbors.
All right, thanks, Cynthia. Just getting my camera on here. That's a pretty broad topic, but it's a good one because that's a lot of what we focus on in DES. Just a little bit of background in terms of the intersection piece of that. We've got about 2,800 intersections in the county. 300 of those are signalized. So that just kind of gives you the context of what we have to handle from the intersection perspective. I think it's a topic of interest to all of us because that's where we see the conflicts, obviously, are at the intersections. So we have different ways of looking at safety at intersections. One of the things that we look at is what are those systemic trends? Like what are the types of crashes we see that are repeating, not necessarily by location, but countywide. And a lot of the information on the systemic trends is in the Vision Zero Action Plan, where bicyclists were identified as a vulnerable user, as were pedestrians. So a lot of the treatments we're doing that are systemic, again, systemic means that something that we can deploy countywide, are things that you'll see this year. We're doing a lot of high visibility crossings, and we've done to this point over 100 crossings where we turned into high visibility, marking stop bars and intersections, upgrading bike lanes and markings similar to what we did last year on Lorcom Lane, where we're putting skips through the intersections to identify the travel path through an intersection for bicyclists. And we're doing other treatments or looking at other things to deploy, such as the 2-stage turn boxes. So bicyclists have that ability to make a left without necessarily taking lane if a bicyclist is not comfortable with it. So a lot of what we're doing this year is really focused on the systemic treatments that we can deploy wide scale that just, hopefully helps mitigate conflicts that we see, or at least takes away some of those factors that lead to conflicts between different road users and specifically motorists and bicyclists. Some of the other things that we can do system-wide are things that we've talked about before on this call. Cynthia had a request for LPIs. So we've studied about 40 locations, have implemented about 30. So about 75% of those that we're studying get implemented with that lead pedestrian interval. It's a lead pedestrian. It can be also used by bicyclists, but that lead interval in the past 3 years or more like 4 years, we had 3 rectangular rapid flashing beacons in Arlington. Now we have about 30. So those are the types of things we can deploy fairly quickly. In addition to the systemic looking at things, what we do is every year we look at what the hotspots are. We look at locations where there's more than one bicycle cross. We also look at locations where there's more than 3 pedestrian crosses or more than 3 vehicle crashes. And then what we do is we look at what are the tactical treatments, some of the low-hanging fruit that we can do to improve those hotspot locations. If there's the need, we look at how to get it into a capital project or a more robust program. So that covers systemic and the hotspots. We also look at corridors, and on our Vision Zero website and in the action plan, we have high injury. We've identified high injury networks, and at 17 corridors for the Arlington streets. It's corridors like Fairfax Drive, Clarendon Boulevard, Columbia Pike, Wilson Boulevard, 4 Mile Run. Some of the VDOT corridors are like Glebe and Lee Highway. But what we're doing on the Arlington corridors is we're doing audits, safety audits, and we're also looking at doing speed studies and reducing speed, really focusing on those streets that we have now that are 35 miles an hour and over. And then next, we're looking at the streets that are 30 miles an hour and over. And at the board, we went to the board with lowering the speed limit on 7 streets. So that's going through that process. And hopefully will be signed in the fall for that reduced speed. And then the final thing in terms of crashes that we do, most of this we do in conjunction with Arlington Police Department. But we meet with Arlington Police Department monthly on a lot of things they discuss. But we have a separate meeting that we meet with them, and also State Highway law enforcement, where we do a quarterly critical crash review. And so that's like any location where there's been a severe injury or a fatality. Each quarter, we'll look at those collectively and figure out what are the things we can do immediately, or in a short time frame to help mitigate some of the critical crashes that we see. So that's kind of how, in general, we handle intersections from those different methods. I guess there is one more thing that I will point out. We do have community investigations where people submit a request for a safety or other type of investigation through DSTO at arlingtonva.us, and we take those and we'll do an engineering study or any other type of analysis that's appropriate based off of the feedback that we get. So that's kind of that fourth leg of the stool of those 3 methods that we typically employ, which is the systemic, the hotspot, and the HIN, but we also do these community investigations. So that's kind of a broad overview of what we do for intersections. In terms of other Vision Zero stuff, there's a lot that's going on, but I could kind of quickly go through some things to keep an eye out for. One of the things that we're starting this year is, we're going to do the analysis of equity areas. That was one of the things that we said we do through Vision Zero. So that's something that we will start at some point this year. And that's a multi-department type effort. So that's, not just us and ACPD, but there's other departments in the county that will be involved with that. And there'll be a community aspect to that as well. One of the things that we have just got a contractor on board and are starting is the toolbox, which is another thing that we said that we would do through Vision Zero. And the toolbox is just a list of engineering things that we will deploy to help improve safety. So that's just starting. There will be public engagement on getting feedback on what tools are in that toolbox. So that's something else to look forward to, where we hope to wrap that up by the end of the year. We're working with APS as well, Arlington Public Schools. Every year we do a lot with them in terms of looking at ways and means to ensure that kids are getting to school safely. So that's something that we'll be working pretty quickly since school is starting, believe it or not, it's starting next month. But so that's things that we will be doing, and actually we will work beyond, the beginning of school with APS to make sure that things are, kids are getting to the school safely. So there's a few efforts that we're working in conjunction with them on that. And those are things too that, Arlington County Police Department is supporting all of us on that too. There's a lot of other things, we're doing a street inventory we've talked about in the Vision Zero action plan, the need for better data and evaluation. So this is kind of something that we're really looking for, is just a better street inventory, so we know more of the characteristics of our street, because there's just some things that we can go out and investigate, but we just want to have that data close by so we can kind of pair that with some of the other data, like with the crash data. We can pair it with some of the other data that we get from law enforcement. We also get some data too by reaching out to hospitals. We're getting data through them as well. So it just gives us another tool, another way of looking at things, so that we can make sure that we're understanding what conditions are leading to crashes adequately. So those are some of the things that are really quickly coming up. Kind of transitioning, I think Sergio is doing the next presentation, is we're updating guidelines as well. And one of those that I know we've discussed in the past in this group is MOT guidelines. And so that's something that's underway too, but I'll save that for Sergio to talk about. But all of our other guidelines that help inform how we deploy things from a safety perspective, we're updating as well. So I know I went through a lot of things really quickly right there, but I'm sure there's some questions with regard to some of those things that I quickly went over. So should we open it to some questions, Cynthia?
Sure. Let's see. Who has questions? I don't see any hands. I have questions, but okay. Randy.
Okay, Dan, have we ever tried to educate motorists about what they're supposed to do when they come to a beacon or a hawk? I have seen people stop at the hawks, and obviously, I mean, chaos theory says that if they're confused enough, you're safer. But, it seems to me that we've never told people what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Randy. I mean, we have, when things go in, we'll do kind of a public release that says this is how you use it, but we have no idea how many people that reaches. And for some of the things that you're saying, specifically at the Hawk, we went like about 3 years ago and changed the signage because we saw that there was some confusion about what people do at a Hawk, what motorists do at a Hawk rather. So we did do a change of all the signage based off of that. That's a really good point, and that is like one of the critical things with Vision Zero, is that we want better communication in terms of what everybody can do to help make the streets better, and educating motorists is a good part of that. And a lot of our communications team is trying to figure out other ways and means to really get more people's attention. And we're all aware that we have to certainly reach motorists too, particularly when we do something that's new or kind of innovative, like one of the pilots or something like that. That's a good point.
So not seeing any other hands, I will take the next turn. So one of my biggest concerns, and one of the biggest causes of serious injury and death, as we all know, is left turning cars. And I saw that in New York City, where I go back and forth, part of their Vision Zero enterprise was to do a whole report on left turning cars and pedestrian and bike safety, because it's just such a big issue. Yeah. And I face that issue, as you've heard me say, at Shirlington Road, or for instance, at Columbia Pike and South Jefferson, where my mom lives. And so I'm crossing there all the time. And I have so many times when I'm crossing Columbia Pike at South Jefferson, and I'm waiting in the middle, and I don't get a turn to cross. I have the walk, but I don't get a turn to cross until all the cars have whipped through. And they're whipping through at my walk, but it's their left green signal. So I've had times when I've had like 2 or 3 seconds left to my walk to start my walk, because the cars were so busy passing. They see me standing in the middle, but it's their turn also. And so I'm wondering, what can Arlington do about situations like that? When I'm on a bike, when I'm walking, it doesn't seem to matter. The same thing happens. And I just wish that there were, at certain intersections, a devoted time when they can't go and I can. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good assessment, Cynthia. Is, we understand that the left turns can be more difficult and more challenging, because those left turns, if it's not a protected left turn phase, the vehicles that are making that turn are obviously focused on that opposing traffic. And so we recognize that, and again, we're kind of doing the data analysis from those different methods that I described that helps us identify where those conditions are, and hopefully do some things to mitigate. A few of the things I talked about, the lead pedestrian interval, basically by getting bicyclists, pedestrians a head start before everybody helps, hopefully bicyclists and pedestrians, kind of establish themselves before a motorist can take any action. I know that there's locations that, through our analysis that we're looking at, like along Fairfax Drive, doing those types of treatments on Fairfax Drive. There's a few other locations that, we're looking at doing similar things. But that's kind of how we're handling it. And I would say too, if you have a specific issue in a specific location, put that in through our DSTNO at arlingtonvirginia.us, because that'll give us another kind of way to help ensure that that's a priority location that we look at. I think there's a lot of ways that we can solve that, but these are things we recognize and are working towards mitigating as well.
If you could put that address in the chat for people, that would be great.
Sure.
So, and I'm also wondering, oh wait, I see Eric Goodman's hand, so he goes first.
Hey, Dan, I do have a question. I believe, and maybe I'm wrong, but I believe the laws have changed somewhat in the state with regard to yielding versus stopping for pedestrians with turns. And I'm just wondering what you all have done with regard to those law changes.
Yeah, that's a good question. So on that, the Virginia was basically what we call a yield state before, where the signage is, yield to pedestrians in the sidewalk or on the crosswalk. Now we're stop for pedestrians. So where we have those knockdown signs, that's what we call them sometimes, familiar, where you have those in-street signs, we converted all those to stop. there's other situations that were looked at, and we're basically following the state guidance on some of those. So like, you'll see that in a signal, for instance, like we were talking about, you'll still see the yield to pedestrians in crosswalk, right? So the signal is the main controlling element of the intersection, right? Because the signal, obviously, if it's red, a vehicle is supposed to stop, right? So that's the main controlling feature. So when you talk about a signal on this intersection, it's more of a supplementary thing that is there to, further indicate to motorists that you have to look out for other users. And sometimes we do say, look, yield to pedestrians or bicyclists. So where the law really changed things in terms of what we did is really those in-street signs that now say stop. Does that answer your question, Eric?
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
So I had another question. So near schools, well, maybe anywhere, there are I had once heard that if you had 6 crashes, then Arlington will consider either a 4-way stop or doing something at an intersection if you have 6 crashes. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I witnessed a couple of years ago now, I think it was, what was crash number 6 at Harrison and 26th Street near Yorktown. And that's a scary intersection, whether you're driving or walking, the visibility is bad and so on. So I was shocked to witness a crash, but I was almost a little bit giddy because I thought, oh, here's number 6. That's awesome. Finally, the county will do something. Now it's been maybe 2 or 3 years since that crash that I saw. Nothing really has happened in terms of like a stop sign or anything. So I'm wondering, was I misled, or is there such a rule that it takes 6 crashes near a school to implement something, or how does it all work?
So there's 2 separate things that are going on there. At 26th and Harrison, that is one of our quick build project locations where we put in the bollards and things to kind of narrow the intersection. Those will be built out in the next year. So that's one thing specific to that. When we do an always stop analysis, we follow the national standard on that. So the national standard is put in place. We follow what we call is the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is the governing standard for, like it says, the traffic control devices, of which a stop is. So we follow that. We look at other conditions too that might be a critical factor. So we kind of have our own little way that we look at things, if you will. And one of them is if there are, pedestrian generators and things like that, we look at that in particular and see if that is something that we can justify doing something. So, that's resulted in, quite a few always stop. We did one. We've actually done a couple on 2nd Street, one over by TJ, Thomas Jefferson Middle School, and one farther to the east. We've done these wherever, and again, we will look at school as a factor. But again, in general, we look at the national standard. Then we look at, does this work? How does this apply to what we know about the streets in Arlington? And does it fit with what we see, what the conditions are? So we'll do an engineering assessment on top of that. But in general, we recognize that if we had stops everywhere, this is something we discussed with law enforcement too, ACPD. If we had stops everywhere, then the hazard would be is that a stop no longer really means what it should. That you have to stop at a stop. It's kind of loosened because people learn to ignore them, and that's not anything that we want to do. And again, this is something that is, in terms of literature and studying in the transportation field, the always stop is something that's probably the most studied thing in transportation, that along with setting speed limits.
I see Jillian has her hand up.
Hi, thank you. And I apologize, I've been in and out. But thinking about the METCD, that of course had not been updated in many years. And it's undergoing an update now, but we don't know whether the US DOT is going to respond to all of the comments that pointed out that this was not necessarily a document that was focused on the safety of people walking and biking and the most vulnerable road users. So it seems a little odd to me that Arlington would defer to the MUTCD, given that it's sort of outdated and that it doesn't really put a priority on vulnerable road users. And I think Harrison and 26 is a really good example of where it fails. That is an intersection that is an important part of the bicycle network. It's 26 is an alternative route to Lee Highway. It's right beside a high school. It's right beside a important destination center at the Lee Harrison stops that has things like taekwondo, tutoring, dance classes that all cater to kids. And then of course all the shops and restaurants and ice cream and all that good stuff and grocery store and everything that's there. So it's shocking to me that with the number of crashes that we've had specifically at this intersection, and all of the generation specifically with vulnerable road users, in particular kids, that Arlington hasn't stepped up for that 26 and put in a stop sign for the Harrison Street traffic. And I think it's emblematic of another problem of relying too much on a document that isn't focused on safety. Arlington is doing better than the average American city on safety. And so relying on this sort of average American document doesn't seem like it's going to help us do better than we have been doing.
Yeah, thanks for the comment there. So with regard to the adoption of the MUTCD, it still is the national standard. And with regard to the qualifications for putting in an always stop, I know that's not going to change. That hasn't really changed for a long time. And again, like I'm saying, there's a lot of extensive literature on that. I sit on the committee that votes on the MUTCD, actually represent NACDO for the committee. So we know, I know it's in there. The things that we see that are coming through that, hopefully that is a process that wraps up soon. We're trying to do in Arlington. So like you pointed out, Julian, that's the good thing. I know that, again, that particular thing isn't something that's going to change in the MUTCD. And that's why we look at it, from a very specific, thorough engineering review we do when we do these things. That's something that, that's the best I could describe it right now. That's where we stand. But, 26 in Harrison, like I said, there's things that we have planned for that location. There are some other always stops that we put around Yorktown very recently. We're trying to, balance the need of all users, and hopefully what we do at 26 in Harrison helps out. Any other questions?
I don't see any more. Yeah. Yeah, personal plea, whatever you can do at 26th and Harrison. I'm scared even to drive through there, honestly. It just feels, so uncomfortable. And with all the kids and it just, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I can just, so we, our family, we mostly bike because of the danger to people walking at that intersection. My family would drive. There was a year where my daughter had dance at the Lee Harrison shops, and given the timing of when it was, the only way we can make it is if she got off of a school bus where she had to cross just Harrison Street. She didn't have to cross 26. She just had to cross Harrison at that intersection. They did it a couple times. It was so dangerous walking or biking that they decided that, take a car. And when my family's saying, we give up, we're taking a car, like we've lost the battle. Because you cannot see the drivers coming up the hill. And because of that lack of visibility, they can't see you, you can't see them. They never stop. There were too many close calls. And then so that's the kind of thing where if we're not going to change that intersection, I think we've lost the game.
All right, thanks. Thanks for the comments.
Thank you. All right, moving right along, a little bit late, but I think we still have ample time for the next topic, which is maintenance of traffic with Sergio. Oh, and Leah too.
Thank you. I can lead off, Leah, and it's good to hear, Dan, that we'll be building out 26th and Harrison. I actually worked on the temporary installation plan, so I know that the bollards and the markings reduced crashes, but they probably didn't eliminate them. But I'm happy with the reduction at least. I did get a bit of time to come up with the presentation while we were talking, so I'll just present that. And if you could just confirm that you're seeing a PowerPoint, that'd be great. All right. So I was invited by Leah to talk about MOTs and some of the process, and I'll speak on the design team. And if Leah, you want to speak up on transportation planning, that'd be good. Or maybe I'll cover everything. But plans are submitted online through Development Services website. So if you go to this website, Civil Engineering, you can coordinate your plan to be submitted. And it goes through various groups, and 4 groups that do review MOTs or transit, design, transportation planning, and then stormwater. And here's a basic summary of some of the plans that we've gotten to date for this year, and then last year, and then 2019. If you calculate it out, it's roughly we're reviewing 1 project per day, and it can be a lot, but luckily we do have resources that we follow. So backing up still, it's accepted and coordinated through Development Services. And that group has this document called the Minimum Acceptance Criteria and Guidelines, or MAC checklist. And in the MAC checklist, it tells the engineer for that project or MOT what are the minimum things that we should see on a plan. And for the BAC, we do have some guidance there that says please follow the VDOT ped and bike guide, which I know hasn't been updated in a while as well, or visit the Virginia Work Area Protection Manual. So some of these guides, maybe you've seen them. And then transportation planning has their own guidelines that they would like. I know they have something with bike detours. If you're ever disturbing a bike facility, please provide a detour or some kind of treatment for the disturbance that you're doing. So like shared or temporary markings or temporary signage, barriers, all that type of things. And the MAC checklist is updated every year. And as Dan said, we are working on some guidelines, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, on where we can start to fill in some of these gaps, because although we have to review MOTs, we have to rely also on some of the state guidelines that we have, and it might be lacking in terms of ped and bike guidance. But that's where, you know, our engineers have to step up, or planners, and do their due diligence in ensuring that whatever MOT project is in place follows some of the basics of maintaining safety for these users, or cyclists right now specifically. So a few guidance that we use are the MTP bicycle element. This will tell us if this project is on a bicycle corridor or not, and to place more attention on the safety of cyclists. And then we also have the MTP for pedestrians, and then sometimes we'll use the comfort map as well, just to know, you know, if there's any higher grade facilities in the area or lower grade ones, like Sharrows. Going back to this real quick, a lot of our engineers are certified for work zone training. So this is a training that's done through VDOT, but we get it done in the county, and we try to get advanced training, but you know, sometimes there's intermediate ones that are being offered, and we'll go for that. But most of our team should have an advanced training work zone certification. And going through some of the tools that the county has for our engineers, which we kind of spoke about earlier, was a crash dashboard. So whenever we're looking at MOT, in order to get familiar with the area further, we want to know some of the crash trends that have been happening there, or the crash types, and then the severity. And it uses the same fields as the FR300. So I know that we mentioned that earlier with ACPD. And some of those fields are catered towards work zone. There's a field that asks, was this crash occurred in a work zone? And then we can filter yes or no, and then we'll have a better idea of where these work zone crashes are occurring. Most of the time they're on, you know, high injury corridors, or they're on corridors that have a lot of vehicle volumes as well. And it does have crashes from 2013 all the way to some of 2021. In addition to getting familiar with the area, we do ask our engineers to go out excuse me, and conduct the site visit. And these are very important because although we have other groups that will go out there and take pictures for us, like inspectors, we know that MOTs, once they're approved, sometimes are not represented in the field as they are on the plan. And this is kind of where other staff, like inspectors or even designers, have to step up and go visit the site and make sure that these MOTs are working for all modes. And you know, here's a couple examples of just bad MOTs that one can experience just walking down the street, but on a plan it might look different. And that's why we rely on other groups as well to enforce that these MOTs are put in place and safe for the various modes. You'll see, like, this happens often, like a sidewalk being blocked and there's no signage for that. And then for a pedestrian, it could be kind of confusing, especially if you have some visibility issues or hard of hearing. And if you can't make it out to the site, then we also have cameras that we use, and we can check up on MOT that's in place. And this is pretty useful because we can navigate the camera left and right, pan around, and just see real-time conditions of an MOT. And we've gotten a few work sites where they were violating or not following the approved plan, and this has served as a good tool to go and you know, either stop their MOT or give them some comments on it. And going back to the site visits, we are trying to get more familiar with the different devices that we can tell contractors or these developers to use in their MOTs. So I've come up with a guide in the past that just goes through different types of devices that we can recommend to the developers. They're always happy to get the plans approved, and you know, we try to tell them to use some of these devices where it makes sense. So it's either like linear curbs, or maybe you've seen some of these bollards. But we give them these spec sheets, and we hope that with these in place, any MOT scenario can be slightly safer, because these are devices that pretty much separate the cyclist or ped from vehicles. And these are just some temporary installations. I'll speak a bit about the MOT updates that we're trying to put out for DES, and really it is we're trying to make this a guide that will help our reviewers better review MOTs for other modes, because right now the Virginia Work Area Protection Manual is centered mostly on vehicles, and we kind of need a guide that will tell our engineers what to look out for the other modes. So every year we do have an opportunity to update the MAC checklist, and we've been going through some of the current ones and find that there's gaps for these other modes, as in like work zones should be using temporary markings and signage to identify detours. That wasn't in the MAC checklist. What was in the MAC checklist was just look at these guides, which is the Virginia Work Area Protection Manual and the VDOT one, which is not enough sometimes. So with these strict guidelines, we can hopefully get better MOTs. And we're trying to also design this guide as a reference document for engineers. So there's some areas here where it mentions like tools that we use, like auto turn, or the various like aerial websites that we have access to, where we can do measurements in case we can't go out to the field, and then Street View, which everybody knows about. So we try to use these references, and we're trying to come up with a guide that will help our engineers get a better grasp on MOTs for other modes than just vehicles. And I don't have too much on my presentation right now, but I'll leave this up right here on the projects that we're working on and some of the minimum acceptance criteria that are under transportation planning, Leo's group, and then my group. And I can ask, or I can answer any questions that might be available.
Yeah, thanks, Sergio. That was great. I think the first question, and I can both of us can address this. How can the BAC and PAC get an opportunity to review or provide input on the MOT plans for big projects? And I think, when you say big projects, I'm thinking like the Dominion substation, that will impact the 4 Mile Run Trail, or something like Water Park is something that I'm already thinking of. How is that going to impact the, Crystal City connector from the Mount Vernon Trail? And I think there will be an opportunity through public engagement for the BAC and PAC to get an opportunity to review these. I know, Dominion substation is a little ways out, but Dana kind of drafted this MOT plan, and that was something that was really helpful. And I know for Crystal City, they just started talking about the MOT for Water Park, and that's something that I will bring to the BAC to ask their opinion on. So for the big projects, namely the ones that impact, major trails, or major kind of like Sergio said, the kind of bike corridors and the MTP, that's either through the project engagement process or something we'll likely bring to the BAC moving forward. Dana, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers one of them. I think that but the problem is, how do we know that an MOT exists? Are they posted? Is there a single MOT page that lists all the approved MOTs and with links to the drawings?
No.
Because Met Park, for example, the MOT is buried in a 500 megabyte drawing set. So right. We don't even, and the problems that existed 3 months ago still exist there. The flag people are doing, or the flagmen are doing a little better job of keeping people out of the space, but there's still nothing that prevents a vehicle from parking, in the bike lane, where the bike lane has to merge into an actual travel lane.
Yeah,
we never gotten to yes on that.
Yeah, I think your first point, I think there's definitely an opportunity to bump the MOTs up on the project page, so that, like you said, rather than kind of sifting through these very large plans, you can just go and hit the link straight from the project page. And I think, another thing is enforcement. How do we get these developers to make sure, like you said, people aren't parking in the bike lanes, people are using, the detour properly. And that's something we're working on and something we can include kind of moving forward as, a new requirement. Like Sergio said, every year we can update this, and that's something we can kind of include in the language, requiring enforcement just as much as you would the time frame and other components of the MOT. It's a hard one though.
Yeah, and I'll just add in with big projects like Met Park. I've talked to Joe Dana, which I think you know him as well. He's one of our inspectors, and they're kind of the eyes on the field, so they will tell us what the issues are too. And if a no parking sign is not working, then he'll suggest the next level up. And the Met Park project was in our queue again for another MOT review. So perhaps I don't know how easy it will be to post up approved MOTs because they do change periodically as the project goes on. The construction staff may notice that they want to switch up the phasing or want to switch something else up, or staff might, get requests from residents or our inspectors saying like this scenario that was approved is not safe. We need to reevaluate this. So the MOT could be ever changing, and especially with the Met Park one, which is the duration's like few years. We've already gotten, I think like 2 MOT, maybe 3 MOT reviews on it, but we'll probably get more as the construction keeps on going. And just one more point to add that MOTs do have a 2-week review period or less. So I agree with Leah that if we can, discuss the major ones with the group, that would be great because we are on a time crunch. So maybe the smaller, like I don't think it has to be every MOT,
Right.
but maybe like the high profile ones can be brought up. But putting them on a website would be kind of difficult since they're getting changed all the time. But something would help. I guess with the Met Park one, we have a really dated one with a huge mega file size. So I'm not sure how to tackle that, but maybe what you suggested, Leah, just bringing the high profile ones to the table would work in the short
Yeah.
term.
I think Dan has a hand and a
I do.
finger.
I've had my hand up. So I want to give a little bit more context to this because we all understand this is a really important topic. First, in terms of the MOT, there's 2 elements to it. One is the design, and the other is the inspection to make sure the contractor is doing what is said in the design. So there's 2 separate pieces to that. To ensure the contractor is doing what they set out in the design requires inspectors. The part where we review the design, which is kind of what you were asking, Dana, is something we put in a lot of effort recently to really change. So whereas like a couple of years ago, an MOT for a capital project or even a site plan may have been 2 or 3 pages, now they're much bigger, in terms of the additional requirements we put on. They go from these smaller things where they're just referencing some of the manuals that Sergio, described, to they have to actually have a plan that shows the different phasing. So there's some MOT plans that will be over 20 pages, right? And like Sergio's saying is, with those 20 pages, there could be multiple iterations of changes. So it's not a static thing. So I just want everybody to understand. And it is a big thing now. There are a lot of pages. The thing that really shifted the focus in the past 2 years, which will take a little while to see a change in implementation, is just some very basic, simple things we're requiring through capital project designers and site plans. Is we're requiring them to lay out specific paths that pedestrians and bicyclists will have to take in order to navigate an MOT. And through that, that's what's led to the process of, for lack of a better description, the MOT is blowing up to a lot of pages because when a designer does that, they see that it's not as simple as what you see on a standard drawing. You see that there's an obstacle in the way, and you have to figure out how to get the pedestrian or the bicyclist from point A to point B along that plan. So I think there's a lot of work that is being done in the plans. I think there's more that we can do. And I think the other thing that, we see as a challenge moving forward is making sure that, with the frequency of changes in MOTs and the new plans, is making sure inspectors are out there, and that requires, person power to go out in the field and looking at these things. So just kind of trying to frame that context. We're seeing positive gains, and we recognize there's more that can be done. But I just want to understand that the MOT is not like this one simple thing. It's this dynamic, multi-page, ever-changing thing.
Thanks, Dan. And I think, one thing that is important is the 2-week review period that Dan and Sergio both mentioned. And I think from a bike standpoint, if it is something that's a major project, and if it is, seems like it's iffy, I also do go out and ride it on a bike. That's something that the transportation planning team has talked more about, getting people to actually go kind of ride MOTs, which I think would be really beneficial, even in this very hot weather. Sergio, the FR 300 dashboard, that's not public facing, correct?
No, that is not.
Okay.
I think the ACPD staff said the same thing. It has some
Right.
private information like name, driver's license number, and plates, all that.
I can help answer that.
Yep.
So through Vision Zero, we do have a crash dashboard right now. That is in somebody's showing it. It looks like. Okay, so we have a crash dashboard, and I know we've had a few requests. So it's kind of basic right now. We've had a few requests for additional information, and those are things that we can incorporate over time. So if there's anything specifically, again, we can't show everything like Lieutenant Clark was saying, but there are some things that we can add to have other features where you can just, analyze some of the trends that we see.
And Dana, just to clarify, the 2-week review period, you said doesn't actually include the BAC, PAC, not for small projects, but I think for large scale, like trail oriented projects, we would run the MOT by you during that 2-week period, if that helps clarify.
Well, yeah. Well, I guess let's continue to use Met Park as the example. It's 3 pages in a 500 megabyte file, and the problem was on site, the builder, the Arlington County inspector, and a representative of the BAC, me, all agreed that that putting up some flex posts would have been a good idea. The builder was ready to do it. Arlington just never told them to do it. How do we actually bring remediation to the process?
Yep, I think it's just better communication and coordination between the inspector and then the reviewer of that project. I'm actually familiar with that one, and I didn't agree with the bollards because it would force. Well, I agreed with the bollards, but not too close to the intersection because I don't want the cyclists to merge within the intersection. I would rather want them to merge prior to the intersection. But as you know, there's a car parking curbside and not listening to or not abiding by the no parking rule / sign that's there. So I did. It takes a little bit of consideration and time to kind of design out an MOT for a bike because you don't want them to merge within the intersection, but if it's possible, it should be before. So it was a little bit back and forth, but we were able to get those comments in the on-base plan review, which I know is not public facing, but that's something that we get every 2 weeks or something for big projects.
Eric Goodman, you've had your hand up for a minute.
Yes, hi, thank you. Well, this issue has come to the pedestrian committee many times over the years. And one of the things I think that has come out of there that I haven't seen implemented is we certainly understand that there's a lack of inspectors, and it really is hard to police contractors because there's so many subcontractors that can be coming onto a site, and usually the general contractor is not very good at policing their subs. So lots of things can happen. one of the things we had mentioned a long time ago was when a contractor applies for the MOT, that they also have to get a sign, which actually is kind of like the sort of sign like how's my driving? You know, if it's not good, please call this number. I think that it would be good to get the public involved as well, that because they have lots of eyes and ears, and when they see or hear something, they can alert inspectors, so the inspectors don't have to drive around all the time and potentially miss a lot of the times when the contractor is not really doing what they should be doing. So I'd like to see some process that would allow that go onto the site when you do have an MOT that allows the public to chime in.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Thank you, Eric. And let's see. Jillian, did you have your hand up for this or for something else?
Yes, for this.
Okay, go ahead, Jillian.
So two things. To pile on to what Eric is saying, I think that sign is incredibly important. We've been asking for it for, I think, 4 years now. Seems like a really basic thing, but it's also very important from an equity standpoint. Everyone on this call is engaged. Everyone on this call can figure out your email addresses and can send you an email or can figure out someone to talk to get you the message. And the people who are engaged in Arlington aren't uniformly distributed. So, you know, when there's a problem in the Cherrydale neighborhood, I am 100% sure you will hear about it. But that's a higher income neighborhood. There are plenty of neighborhoods in Arlington where I don't think it's likely that you're going to hear about the problem because people don't know that they can report the problem. So this sign, which was actually why I first raised my hand, I think should be the priority coming out of this meeting. That these signs that we've been asking for 4 years should just automatically should go up in clear language, in big font, in multiple languages, you know, in clear writing, and in least Spanish and English at every site. You can call if you see a problem, and here's where you call, or email, or whatever the answer is, but make it easy for people. And then the other thing I was going to say, Sergio, I appreciate that you thought about the safety aspect of merging in an intersection. As someone who bikes with kids, I can tell you, I'm not going to merge. If I'm there, if I've taken a bike lane that I expect to be a protected bike lane, I'm either, especially when I'm riding with my kids, I'm either going to turn to a separate road that's low stress, or I'm going to get on the sidewalk. So when you pull those bollards back from the intersection, you take a block that was a low stress block and you make the whole block not low stress. Because when I'm riding with my kids, it doesn't matter that 90% of the block has the protection. If that 10% doesn't have protection, it's not protected. I can expect that cars will park in it. I will expect that cars will merge dangerously in it. I'm not going to want to ride with my kids. But I'm not here to litigate that particular block, but to illustrate the kind of conversation that needs to be had. Because biking, especially family biking, especially e-bikes, because e-bikes and cargo bikes are new to the scene, aren't folded into the engineering and aren't in the manuals. They're not reflected in what you guys learned in school. And there isn't always a standard best practice that you can just say, that's the rule, we're going to apply it. And so this is an area, particularly low stress biking, where you have to talk to people who do it to understand how to get it right. And we're not always going to get it right the first time. You have to iterate with the people who do it. And so if there's one meeting where there are people who bike that are involved, and then there's someone else that can trump that and just say, oh, I think I know, but you've just wasted everybody's time. You know, this should be a process where you listen to the experiences, and you know, if someone is going to overrule the meeting, they should have to listen to the experiences of the people that were involved in the meeting and the reasoning behind what they did, not because they were necessarily going to be right and the engineer is necessarily going to be wrong, but we need to have that conversation because this isn't an area where there's established engineering practices because it's pretty new to the scene.
I think one thing that Dan and Sergio's team did that I was pretty impressed with, Jillian, was on that South Walter Reed or Walter Reed and South Courthouse, they did do an auto turn movement for a cargo bike after you put that, before and after you put that input in. So that is something we're kind of putting into engineering and MOTs, even though there's not necessarily kind of standards for it. I think because we have strong, you know, advocates, we have a lot of cargo bikes in the county. It's something that we're putting in, and that's something maybe, like Sergio mentioned, we can kind of formalize to make sure that's put in the process.
Yeah,
Thank
and all
you.
that and that signage for MOTs, I think, you know, that would be super helpful if we can add in that into the minimum acceptance criteria, because I do see it for a lot of our capital projects and temporary projects. You'll see like a nice blue sign that explains the, you know, the project and the name of the project, and it usually has like a contact. But I would love to see that in the MOT, because that would help us out a lot as well in narrowing down what type of issues we're having. But you know, I think that's a good recommendation as well.
Yeah, and something clear that we have been pointed to that sign before, but that sign isn't clear. It isn't something that and I don't want to say uneducated, like generally uneducated, but a person who's not engaged with this process all the time, something they're gonna understand.
Let's see, Pam, do you have your hand up? Let's see. Pam Van Hine, maybe it was from something else.
I think she put it up recently.
Well, does anyone else have and Jillian, thank you for that. Dana, thank you.
Hi.
Eric.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I sat on my button. Sorry about that. This has been a really helpful discussion about MOT, and I'd love to continue this at the PAC sometime. It's been a while since we've discussed MOT. I totally agree with what Eric and Jillian have been saying, and as Eric said, the PAC has been pushing for this sign for a very long time. I also like the idea that was mentioned earlier of having which I thought I heard, BAC and PAC volunteers actually testing the MOT bike pattern and walk pattern, see if it works and see if the problems are there and they're fixed. And my final suggestion, which we've also been pushing for years, is to have the option of reporting construction problems through the reporter problem. There is no way to do that, and that would be a nice feature to have. So thank you.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Well, thanks, Sergio. That was a great presentation. I think you might be doing it at the PAC, it sounds like.
Dana, did you have one more question?
Oh,
yeah. The question is, this sign is basically you just steal the model for the tree protection ordinance, because we currently spend more time protecting trees than we do pedestrians. Can we presume that you guys are going to move forward with implementing this, or do you need help? Who has the action?
I think that's something that we'll have to kind of pass up through, like my department, also TNO, you know, like manufacturing the signs. I think it's something we can bring back and kind of, I guess, let you know the status on. Sorry for the background noise.
So next month you can advise us on the September meeting?
Yeah, I think that sounds like a reasonable timeline.
Yeah, I would love to work on that. I think, you know, we might have to get some of the details down, like whose number goes there. Is it the superintendent, or is it inspection services general number? I don't want to overwhelm our limited county staff that inspects, but perhaps the superintendent could post his number or contact info there. But yeah, I would love to just keep on discussing that sign.
Oh, I'm sure everyone will want their number up there. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Sergio. That was very, very helpful.
Thank you for the invite.
So I think we were just going to do some updates, Leah. Yeah?
Let me see what you had sent. I think Dan kind of answered a few of the Shirlington questions, so that was helpful. Yeah, I think actually a lot of the project updates have been covered because Shirlington was covered, Route 1 was covered, intersection improvements was covered as well. So I think really the only update is just the July 12th VDOT deadline. The Dominion Virginia East substation work, that's kind of ongoing. At this point, it's construction is so far out that they're in the early stages. I sent an email, I believe, last week to check in on the MOT and everything that's going on, and was told it's still pretty far out. And then the last thing was, yep, that was it. So I think we managed to cover most of the updates during the meeting itself. Oh, one thing I did want to bring, some people, some committees take a break in July or August. I will leave that up to you if you want to have an August meeting. Totally up to you all. So that's just something to consider. That is the only outstanding item.
I guess.
Pam and Dana, do you have updates?
Just to remind people that this Friday there are 3 transportation projects in 22202 that have deadlines. The Crystal City Bike Network, which of course you know all about, the Army Navy Drive Missing Link, and the 15th Street Clark Bell improvements. So really important that everybody study that and get those comments in. Thank you.
Dana, did you have something to add?
Nope.
Okay, and with the updates, whatever happened in Arlington, I think there was a change in the law, but I didn't really follow it closely. The whole issue of slow streets and whether we could lower the speed limit. What I think Virginia now allows us to lower the speed limit below 25. Are we planning to, or did I mishear something?
No, so that legislation did pass, and we are studying areas where that would be possible to lower the speed limit. We can't do that yet because first you need the county to pass an ordinance in order to have speed limits under 25. So that would be the first step. And then we're kind of just prepping to kind of be ready to move into action once that is brought up if it's passed. So,
along the speed limit sign, how about we just get the speed limits posted that are currently enacted in statute? The first speed limit sign on Route 1 that says 35 miles an hour is just north of 18th Street. So motorists has come in at either 55 miles an hour off the interstate or 45 miles an hour off Route 110 for almost 2,000 feet before they actually hit a speed limit that's actually enforceable. Just put a 35 mile an hour speed limit sign where the county statute says 35 mile an hour starts.
Yeah, maybe that's something we can address once this ordinance passes, we can start to put things up. Are you saying
it doesn't take an ordinance? The ordinance is already in effect. Arlington says 35 miles an hour from 395 south on Route 1. We're 2,000 feet into it.
That
Yeah.
is something I can bring to the department that works on signage.
Dana?
Yeah.
We'll take a look at that.
And please look harder at Crystal Drive as well.
Okay. If
Yeah.
there's anything specific, just, you know.
Yeah, it's the email I sent you 2 weeks or last week, where the contractor put up a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit and
Got
a
it.
25-mile-an-hour speed zone.
Yep.
And the report of problem says we'll get to it in 12 weeks.
We'll look at it.
Yeah.
We'll look at it as
Yeah,
soon as
it's not a distinguished response, guys.
All right, thanks, Dana.
So, going back a minute, I'm slow here. What does it take for Arlington to pass that ordinance? And what can we do to encourage Arlington to get on with it and to pass it? Who needs to pass it, and do they need some encouragement, or?
That would be the county board would need to pass that along with the county manager.
And is that in question whether it would pass?
I don't believe so. I think it's kind of just a matter of timing at this point. I can check in with Ben Aiken and get back to you on that, though.
That would be great. Okay. Anyone else? Dana, you have your hand up.
Sorry. This is Eric. Just wanted to
Eric.
ask, just to add to what you said, would it be helpful to have a letter of support from our committee to the county manager about passing that ordinance or about moving forward with that ordinance?
I think definitely it would be. I just need to figure out when the timing is. So once I figure that out, I will let Eric, you, Cynthia, and Elizabeth know. I think it's just a yes is the short answer. A matter of when is the long answer, and that's what I'll get back to you on. I think the timing on that would be important.
That would be great. It's not a hard letter to write, and maybe we can write it like several committees together. Could put a letter together and sign it. Thank you so much. It's 9:01, so unless anyone else has a pressing issue, I guess that's it, and we will go ahead with the letter to Mr. Schwartz regarding Route 1. I did have one question, which is, how do we sign it? Do we just sign it Bicycle Advisory Committee, or what's the protocol? Does anyone know?
I think in the past it's been like one person's name and the Bicycle Advisory Committee, from what I remember from previous letters. So it would be like Cynthia Palmer, Vice Chair, and then under that, and Bicycle Advisory Committee.
Okay.
I think normally you would put, Elizabeth's name on it too, but since she cannot vouch for herself, I would just lump her in with the rest of the group.
Got it.
Yeah.
This sounds good.
Yeah, and also big shout out Cynthia and Dana. Thank you for coordinating on the agenda while Elizabeth was out of town. I appreciate it.
You've got BAC stationery, right? That's got your names on it and says BAC and all that. So yeah, so since Elizabeth isn't here, Cynthia would just sign it as the vice chair. That should work.
Thanks, Pam.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for coming, everyone. Be safe. Keep drinking that water or the Gatorade or whatever it is. And we'll see you probably in a month, but we'll touch base with Elizabeth to see what she wants to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good meeting.
Thanks all.
Good night.
Good night.